It's a pleasure to receive you after 2 years. It's quite a long time, but it's a great pleasure to see all the people that have an interest for our industry to be here with us. Just 3 words. Certainly, with time to exchange about the next season. It will be great, sure. But we have some questions. And also for the yacht club, we have 2 missions. The first one is to be a club, like a normal club. And the second one is to have a delegation service public, is to make the promotion of Monaco in yachting and to make an animation for the port and for Monaco. For that reason, we have created the cluster a few years ago. And now we have another project. We start with the Monaco Capital du Yachting 10 years ago. It was in 2012. Now we are 10 years after. We decide to change a little bit our mission, and now we have a Monaco Capital Events of Yachting. And for that, I will be very pleased to introduce Claudia Battani. She's in charge of this project. Thanks, Claudia.
Welcome to everybody. Merci d'être tous là. Je vais vous présenter un tout petit peu ce qu'est cette initiative Monaco Capital of Advanced Yachting. J'ai fait quelques rapides slides. Vous allez voir, c'est très rapide. Mais je crois que c'est important qu'on soit tous sur la même longueur d'onde. Un instant, merci. Alors, pour commencer à expliquer ce qu'est Monaco Capital of Advanced Yachting, je voudrais rappeler quand même quelques chiffres du yachting à Monaco. Le yachting, sur la place, ça représente 743 millions d'euros de chiffre d'affaires, 252 sociétés basées à Monaco, 1560 emplois à terre. Il y a aussi quelques faits marquants. Une légitimité maritime, une situation géographique hors pair, une destination touristique avec des atouts multiples qui répondent aux attentes des plaisanciers et des armateurs. Et enfin, une concentration très forte d'acteurs et de services indispensables pour l'industrie. Il y a 10 ans, comme le disait Bernard, en 2012, Monaco, capitale du yachting, voyait le jour et était lancé essentiellement pour sensibiliser les acteurs locaux. Des actions évidemment concrètes ont été faites et cette démarche s'est vite imposée comme une évidence pour l'attractivité de la principauté. Je vous laisse découvrir ça en images.
C'était un de nos rêves, c'est devenu une réalité. Les pavillons qui viennent d'être envoyés flottent fièrement sur notre nouveau siège. Je souhaite à cette occasion rendre hommage à nos membres fondateurs qui, en 1953, permis la création de notre club, avec une pensée toute particulière pour mon père, le prince Régnier III.
Such a flagship means opening up new horizons and in some ways taking on a new adventure. Le yachting n'est pas qu'une activité de loisir, c'est aussi une industrie en plein développement. Fédérer l'ensemble des professionnels, mutualiser les moyens et développer des synergies, telles sont les actions que nous entendons mener pour mettre en valeur nos atouts. Favoriser des escales de courte durée en principauté qui soient en mesure d'offrir aux armateurs et aux professionnels un choix étendu de services exclusifs. Un port doit être ouvert sur le monde. Et l'objectif poursuivi de mise en place d'un centre de formation nautique.
C'est également de notre devoir d'encourager la construction de marinas vertueuses, sortant que notre club et sa marina puissent être des démonstrateurs pour tester des solutions innovantes
In this spirit, I'd like to encourage all initiatives. A race for solar-powered boats organized for the first time in the Mediterranean.
It's the best energy challenge event that I've ever attended.
And we can change our world now because the technology is there.
You see that it is technology, and that's why I accepted to be the patron of this adventure.
Nous savons l'importance des océans pour notre avenir commun. La politique de Monaco à cet égard est constante et déterminée, avec l'accueil de nombreux organismes et événements scientifiques qui tenteront de mettre en exergue de nouveaux éléments concrets étayant les messages de sensibilisation et d'alerte. Ce programme que nous conduisons, les principes que nous défendons ici tous ensemble, obéissent à une même ambition, celle d'inventer un nouveau mode de développement capable de concilier les impératifs de l'océan et les besoins des hommes.
Le yachting de demain, c'est un yachting qui doit être ambitieux sur le plan économique en ce qui concerne les nouvelles énergies et qui doit être aussi très respectueux de la transition écologique. Il y a beaucoup d'acteurs, près de 1000 emplois à Monaco sur le yachting. C'est un facteur essentiel de l'attractivité de Monaco.
Monaco est toujours un exemple. Nous sommes un petit État avec une forte réactivité, un fort engagement de nos partenaires du secteur privé. Nous devons montrer l'exemple et nos investissements sont là à hauteur.
Nous voilà donc fin prêts pour une nouvelle étape. Soyez les bienvenus à bord. S'il nous appartient à présent d'écrire ici un nouveau chapitre de notre histoire maritime, à nous de garder le cap pour faire de nos rêves communs la réalité de demain.
En ce sens, nous avons édité une charte d'engagement qui se base aussi sur les objectifs de l'ONU. Et je vous invite à découvrir nos premiers signataires, dont nous sommes très fiers et qu'on remercie déjà. Voilà donc ce premier socle. Comme vous le voyez, il s'agit bien d'une marque collective, une marque ombrelle, et nous vous invitons à adhérer, à vous l'approprier et à la développer. Et enfin, afin d'assumer et d'affirmer notre place de leader à l'international, et je pèse bien mes mots, à l'international, puisque c'est bien ça qu'on vise, c'est vraiment cette dimension qu'on vise aujourd'hui, nous devons d'être un modèle. Et pour cela, on doit joindre nos forces pour vraiment renforcer l'attractivité de la principauté, susciter des vocations par la formation, encourager et promouvoir tout ce qui est innovation pour construire le yachting de demain, encourager et favoriser les synergies et coordonner les actions avec vous, les acteurs, pour enfin communiquer et exporter notre savoir-faire. Convaincu que vous comprenez la valeur de cette initiative et ses enjeux, je serai ravi, pour ceux qui le souhaitent, de venir vous rencontrer pour pouvoir échanger ensemble et discuter d'opportunités futures de collaboration.
So my name is Marijn de Waard. I'm the founder of Super Yacht Times. Well, welcome to my panel members. I think the nice thing about being a moderator is I don't have to answer those difficult questions. I first start off with a few statistics about the market, some numbers. I won't go in too much detail because I think we will, discuss the impact of the figures and everything that's happening and has happened with our panel members. So we made an overview from the start of 2020 till the first quarter of this year. And this is all sales, both new and used. And in 2021, we had almost 800 sales of yachts over 30 meters, which is probably makes it the best year ever in yachting. And if you look at 2020, there's definitely a big difference. And we go a little bit deeper now in new yacht sales and used yacht sales. So you can see Q2 of 2020, that's where the big drop was, and that was, of course, because of the pandemic, the uncertainty it created. It went on in Q3, but in Q4 you can already see there was a big increase of new yacht sales, and basically that continued throughout the whole of 2021. And 2021 was the best year ever for new yacht sales, and I think the second best year was 2007. There were just under 300 yachts sold, but in 2021 there were 305 new yachts over 30 meters sold. Q1 of this year, you see a big drop, of course, because of the situation in Ukraine, the war, but it's also, there is just less yachts available, you know, like speculation boats are being sold out, new contracts are, you know, you have to wait 3, 4, 5 years for a new boat, so there is simply less available. Used yacht sales, I mean, it's a bit of a similar picture. 2021 was an incredibly good year, and I'm sure Raphael has a few more statistics on that as well. The start of the year, I mean, there is less yachts sold. I mean, it's probably, you know, like the only worst quarters were 2020, the first 2 quarters. But I mean, it's not only because of the war in Ukraine, but it's also there is not enough yachts for sale, and there is still, from what I hear, a lot of appetite for people to buy boats. This is the number of new yachts coming onto the market, and 2 things are probably interesting. In the second quarter of 2020, when the pandemic really hit the world, there were less yachts coming onto the market, and we see the same happening in Q1 of this year. I don't know, maybe Raphael can shed some light on this as well, but maybe because of a crisis, people hold on to their boats, or maybe just people don't want to sell the boat because they cannot find a new one. So it will be interesting to know why that is. Price changes. So I think, you know, like it has been going down a lot, the number of price changes we record per month. Of course, that's because there is simply less yachts available for sale. Yachts are sold quicker. Some yachts are even days or weeks on the market and are sold. And interestingly, we see quite a few price increases, especially on the new build market. And this is the last slide of today to say a little bit more about the availability of new yachts. So usually at the start of a year, there are 1/3 of the boats under construction are for sale. And you can see that was beginning of 2020 the case, beginning of 2021. But right now, there is only 21% of the yachts under construction that are for sale. And I'm sure Mario from Azimut Benetti has some figures to share as well about how they have been performing. So let's start the panel discussion now. Do I need to? Oh, that's the next one. Well, let's put a nice picture of. Let's put us on a. Mario, maybe we can start with you to give a bit of an update on the figures from the Azimut Benetti Group.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Of course, despite the really sad situation related to the conflict and the terrible, dramatic consequences that it's bringing, I must say that with regards to Azimut Benetti Group, this year we are having a record-breaking in terms of sales. Just to give you a figure, we are going to close the 2022 year with a forecasted turnover of 1.2 billion euro. The backlog of the group today is 2.2 billion euro. And this is a record-breaking figure because in more than 50 years of history, this is the really first time that we reach such a remarkable result. Of course, the consequences of the conflict are also unpredictable for us. We cannot pretend not to be involved in what the situation is bringing to us. Just to give you an idea, Azimut Benetti Group has luckily, no Russian owner sanction among our customers. But of course, we know that the situation will bring some collateral complications, maybe surely related to the cost of the materials, the energy, etc. And this will be handled one-to-one with the negotiation with customers on the big boats. These are the main figures that so far are giving us an incredible picture because, honestly speaking, I'll give you another example. On Friday, we launched the entry level of the Benetti fleet, which is the Oasis 34 meter. And before it touched the water, 10 units are already sold. With the Oasis 40 meters, we reached 28 units sold, and 18 with regards to the 50 meters. So I cannot hide the fact that despite this situation, we are facing a really, really outstanding, a positive market result.
Thank you, Mario. That's very good to hear. Raphael, can you shed some light on the brokerage side of the business and charter?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see a full room this morning. Congratulations on your result. This is amazing. Well done. When it comes to the second hand, I think I have slightly different numbers than what we saw earlier. I'm not that pessimistic in terms of the drop we've seen 21 versus 22. Actually, our numbers shows a slightly different analysis for the first quarter of 22 versus 21. We only see a drop of 23% versus last year, and we're still ahead. I'm in Q1 of 21, and we're still ahead of 73% on Q1 of 20, which obviously was affected by the pandemic. So I think the numbers have obviously dropped a lot, but they're not such a huge decrease, and there's still a strong appetite for yachting. There's a couple of parameters which we need to bear in mind for that drop. One is the lack of inventory. Clearly, we have had a huge number of boats sold last year. Number of boats which are put on the market, as you rightly outlined. Few reasons for it, I'll say. Firstly, you know, if you sell your boat today, you don't know what you're going to find because you don't know what is available for you to buy. So you're very careful before you put your boat for sale. When it comes to the charter market, we see an incredible activity. 21 was already extremely strong. So far, in the first quarter of 22, ourselves, on our charter management fleet, we see an increase of 160% of booking versus 21. In terms of retail, it's over 75% increase. And this is obviously first quarter, include the months up to the months of March. So we saw a slight slowdown, obviously, when the war in Ukraine started, and then it picked up again tremendously. So to go back to what you said earlier, there's still a very strong appetite for yachting, very, very strong. And I think we have to be very fortunate to be in this industry. So many are being affected by, one, the pandemic, two, the war, and yet yachting is thriving. And hopefully it carries on like this. Of course, we have our challenges, which I think we will talk about later, one being the war. But I think the numbers are still extremely optimistic. It's only Q1. We still have 3 quarters to go. But fingers crossed and carries on like this.
Thank you, Raphael. I think now we ask Michelle to give her view on the insurance market and what the challenges are there.
Morning. Yeah, I think the insurance market is facing different challenges to the brokerage houses. And in terms of Pantanius ourselves, we're not too badly affected by it, but it brings other challenges in the fact that some insurers in the market are pulling out of insuring any Russian business, or they're deciding not to renew it. So we have some yachts still on cover that possibly have no hull insurance at the moment, or the P&I Club has decided not to continue. And then we're faced with the challenge of trying to find alternatives in the market, which is very difficult at the moment. So that's one of the challenges we face. And another is obviously related to flag and class, and if the flag decide to deflag or not renew class at renewal, then this will then impact on the insurance as well. And that's a longer term thing because we'll see what happens with that. That's quite new at the moment. I mean, a lot of this is unprecedented, so we just don't know what's going to happen in the next few months. But in terms of the yachts we've got now, the ones that we continue to cover, we're not sure about the renewals, and we're not sure about some of the insurers who are pulling out because of reputational risks, essentially. So that's some of the challenges we face. The other problem is that we can continue to insure some of these yachts, but they can't get the premium to us. So we had one yesterday where they want to cancel the cover because they can't pay the premium because the money is in a sanctioned bank. So as much as we want to keep this business, we're faced with challenges in that respect, as if we just cannot do it. So, but that's a small percentage of our business. So, you know, in terms of the figures for this year so far, it's business as usual. We're seeing lots and lots of activity on yacht sales, very quick sales where we're told the day before that it's being sold, with unfortunately no lead time. But yeah, so yes, we've got lots of challenges, but I think in terms of how it's affecting us generally, it's not too bad.
Thank you, Michelle. Anthony, do you see similar problems in the financing market?
So, I mean, in terms of direct impact, I would say that it's quite limited. As Michelle mentioned, the banking and insurance are always a bit related. And also the fact that it's been a few years now that we saw less and less inquiries from the I would say the Russian client, or the really Russian-based clients, which are the one today under restrictions or under sanctions. But on the other hand, we had a month and a half, pretty much as lots of people in the industry, we had a month and a half of strong decrease in terms of inquiries, in terms of activity because of the war started. Now we are looking at the indirect impact. So we see some related to insurance. Some of our Russian clients are a bit in a questioning moment because they are starting the renewal period and they don't really know if European insurers will accept that. Then we have a few situations, as I'm sure some of you have encountered, but a boat that has not been provided with fuel or is looking for other options. But it's very limited as of now. And it's more on the long-term perspective, because we have to remind that the Russians have been the leading clients for some years in the industry, and also providing the new trends of the industry. And where now we are looking at what can be done in terms of environment, and we want to push forward and everything. There is a huge flow, I would say, of equity and of activities that were coming from the Russian, which is, I think, now pretty much more complicated. So this is what us as a financial institution looking at being ahead of all the all the new trends and all the new developments, especially in terms of ecology. We will look the impacts that it may have on the industry.
Thank you, Anthony. Edouard, I think lawyers are always busy, good times and bad times. What are some of the challenges you are facing now?
Well, in fact, the truth is that currently we're pretty much in a medium period now. At first, I mean, the issue was really about the application of the regulation, the way it was construed. And this is still not very much straightforward because we still have a lot of loopholes. The future now what I see is that we see the way the regulation was implemented, that it's addressing some of the old mechanisms that we used to consider as granted in the industry. I'm talking about flags, I'm talking about ownership, etc. And that regulation shows the whole limits of the whole system. And the challenges that we're going to have in the next few years, which is, I mean, I think that the crisis in Russia is not the triggering event, it's just an acceleration of the process. The challenges that we'll have in the next few years is going to look at new way of buying a yacht, of operating a yacht, of registering a yacht. That's, the challenges that are to come. What we're experiencing now, from my experience, is very similar to what we experienced, I mean, in the bank field, in the legal field 6-7 years ago. Being that you had additional communication, you had additional inquiry. I mean, for the people who were based in Monaco, they were, all addressing the SIGFE issue last year. So all of that is really connected. So we're in a process of what we called in the past from offshoreization to onshoreization. And that's a new challenge to me. That's going to be addressed by, that will have to be addressed by the industry.
Very good. I think we also did the statistics on the Russian ownership, and we have around 40 meter plus 9% of the clients are from Russia. If you look at the volume of boats, then it's probably 16% of the market because they own quite large yachts. The US market we see is the strongest. Is that also what you see, Raphael? Is the US really driving the market now?
Absolutely. I mean, today, the last 3 years, but the US market has been driving yachting for, I think, forever. I mean, I would be a lie to say it has not been. I mean, this is in their DNA. So the US, they've been driving the yachting market for a long, long time. And clearly, the last 3 years, their impact on our industry has been tremendous. I mean, at our level, we see probably 60% of our buyers are US-based, and same with our charterers. And one of the new elements, I think some of the experts in the room here may contradict me, but what we've seen also as a trend from the US buyers is like, they would traditionally remain within the below 80 meters market, but today US buyers buy large boats as well. So it's not rare to see a US buyer to buy a 100+ meter boat, which is also something new in our industry. So I think it's definitely the driving force into yachting today. There is a lot of appetite for yachting in US, and it has clearly been a strong factor for the growth of our industry for the last 3-4 years.
And I mean, we read all these articles about boats being frozen, being arrested, and now there is also being talks about confiscating and selling these boats. Is that legally possible, Edouard? Do you think is that as easy as it sounds?
No, it's not as easy. The problem is that you have, all the rules do not have the same strengths, and the problem is that the regulation we're talking about is supposed to be at the top of the pyramid. So regulation from the EU is stronger than national law, etc. But you have international convention as well, and some of what is stated in those regulations, in fact, contradict the international regulations. So it's not going to be that easy. In fact, it depends on domestic law. I mean, everybody's confused about freezing, arresting, confiscating, etc. So it depends on each country's regulation, the way it's going to be construed by judges. And we'll see later on what's going to come, because now, there's always a time for regulation, then for the media, and then for the judge. The time of the justice is unfortunately longer than the time of the media. But we'll see what's going to be the position of the judge. So to reply to your question, no, it's not that easy.
But there again, I think the US government is leading the charge.
I mean, I'm not going to speak about the US because that's a different framework. Also, I mean, I'm sure that my American colleague would have a lot to say about this, but they're less concerned. But I'm more talking about the EU side of things. There's a principle which is the right of ownership, for instance. So how can you deprive somebody of the ownership of his boat?
And Raphael, I guess, if there is a lot of appetite from buyers, do you get clients as well asking if they can buy Russian-owned boats? Is there really some clients thinking that everything is for sale now and they can jump onto it?
There's always people thinking everything is for sale at a good price. So today, of course, you see some demand of individual asking, oh, that boat might be for sale. Is there a deal to be made on that boat? And I think this is something I'd like to point out here. We've been talking a lot of inflation on boat sales, lack of inventory, etc., etc., etc. But at our level, at least, we don't see yet that inflation being into play, i.e. buyers are buying their boats at the right price and sellers are selling their boat at the right price. If you're a seller and want far too much money for your boat, you're unlikely going to sell it. Same, if you're a buyer who wants to make a silly offer on a boat, you're unlikely to buy it. And even more so today, because of the lack of inventory. So going back to your initial questions, of course we see a lot of interest and demand around boats which are supposedly owned by Russians when you know who is the owner. But this is not yet generality, and this is probably something you will see more into the yards. Whichever yards at some boats today which are being ordered by Russian, and whereby some Russian may want to sell their asset.
So is your phone ringing a lot, Mario, or from the sales team?
Yes, consider that with regards to Azimut Benetti Group, the Russian are about the 8% of our customer base. And yes, it's ringing, but I think that for a shipyard, the solution is to play on the global market in order to compensate the possible loss of some part of the markets with the growing of other areas, such as the United States, which I agree are pushing and carrying on all the orders, etc. Also on bigger boats. Biden declared a budget for next year that reach about $2 trillion. So I think that once again, United States will help to compensate what's happening in some other countries like Russia, etc.
I mean, sorry, if I may add to the previous points we discussed. I mean, we have had some examples of boats being built today and put on the market for sale, being sold within a day. Within a day, we had the LOI on this boat, so probably or even our competitors are experiencing the same thing. So it clearly shows you that if the boats are properly marketed in terms of price, there's still a strong appetite.
Anthony, you're not only working with yachts, but yachts have had a lot of bad publicity in recent months. Do you feel from like your company that there is less appetite to work with yachts because of this bad publicity?
Well, I won't say that there is less appetite. I think that it's the financial industry has always always tried to basically change with regards to some past mistakes. With yachting, speaking for SocGen, we didn't have any bad experience in that sense, which I think is not the case for all my competitors. But we are being more and more, I would say, looked by some internal bodies, especially in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, the environmental impact. The Russian conflict is, I would say, an indirect thing coming to more and more, I would say, not restriction internally, but being exigent on the type of asset we finance. We always finance recent yachts. So everything which I would say is a bit older now. When last year we had some room to finance this type of assets, but let's say that today it's less and less possible. Then of course in terms of the type of shipyards and the type of boat as well, because we are looking carefully at what's happening on the sailing boat market to also participate to some sailing boat projects, which I think 5 years ago, 7 years ago, the financial person taking in charge of saying, yes, you can finance this client and this vessel because it's a risky asset, but we are comfortable. With a sailing boat, they were simply saying, oh, it's illiquid. We don't have, over 45 meters. There is very few sailing boats on the market. So if the bank has to repossess it, what the bank can get on the market. The philosophy has strictly changed over the last 3-4 years. So COVID, of course, has also helped because we saw most of the financial institution, launching their own internal environmental policies and products. But I would say that What we, as I mentioned earlier, what we are now looking carefully is the impact that the conflict may have on the industry on the developments. And the presentation we had earlier on the Monaco capital of advanced yachting is very important. And I think we, as all the professionals of the industry in Monaco, we need to be careful on the trends of all the boats going now out of Europe. Will they come back once the conflict will be done, will be over? What will be this person thinking? Even some nationalities which are not concerned as of today by the conflict, they may say, oh, we see that the Western are taking restrictions, sanctions, because of something that has been decided by our government, and we're not, I would say, responsible for what the government is doing. So some Middle East clients may also think this way and say, it's not safe to have my boat in the Med or in Monaco or working with only professionals of Monaco. So we need to be proactive on that and also do a bit of philosophy, and I think that's also part of our role.
Thank you. Michel, you see more and more yachts heading to places, Turkey, the Middle East, and even Russia. Does that worry you if these boats go to these places, or doesn't it matter for your insurance?
Yeah, at the moment, most policies will have an exclusion for pretty much most of the Black Sea, apart from the Turkish side. So if they're heading there, then they're probably uninsured anyway. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of yachts going to Turkey, Greece, obviously further afield. We've got some in the Indian Ocean. And in terms of their cruising area, as long as they've notified us, then that's fine, there's no problem. If they are heading to the Indian Ocean, then you've got other factors, like they have to buy extra war cover and extra piracy cover. So they can't kind of just head off there without informing us anyway. But
now you will be asking more questions to them as well when they're going there and when they want to do these things.
Yeah, we've just done a huge administration internally to get every single ultimate beneficial owner on our... So we know hopefully who everyone is now. But yeah, before we pay any claims, before we refund any premiums, before we add extra cover, then we're doing deep checking to make sure everything's okay.
And do you see more flag authorities delisting yachts as well? Do you expect that to happen more, and is that already happening?
Yeah, I think some of the flags are already not taking on new business from Russian-owned yachts, so flagging a new yacht, I think, is going to be difficult. I don't know, I haven't spoken to all the flag states, but I've spoken to a couple that they're taking the stance that they're not flagging any new business. But we haven't seen personally at Pantanius any yachts being deflagged yet. But I think possibly at renewal or class renewal might be a problem.
Edward, you mentioned in our conversation as well earlier that you also foresee problems with flags.
Yeah, but from both sides, I think that there are going to be issues, on the short run with flagging yacht, depending on the owners. I see the expectations being increased. The issues that we're facing, which is not totally connected with the Russian crisis, is that what people need to understand is that what is clean from a maritime yachting perspective, the flags, many flags, are in fact from a bank financial perspective often grey and blacklisted. So there's been a trend over the past 2 years. So you'd go to, I'm not going to quote any flag, but you would go to that flag, which from maritime law perspective, the best is on the Paris MOU whitelist. But the owner would face issue with his bank, with compliance, with reputation as well, because, the whole prejudice from, the commoner, people who are not involved in the industry, is to say, well, if you go with those registration, that's because you want to escape tax, etc. Where in fact the real reason, but only people from the industry know that, is that because those flags are the best. And this is going to accelerate that trend, because the issue is that I don't think, for instance, that many of the good flags are small countries' flags, which are not equipped from an international perspective to face, to be honest, the whole pressure coming with this type of crisis. And I expect, well, this is my guess, no, I'm not a fortune teller, an increase of the biggest countries' flags, of the onshore flags, which are going to be stronger, which are more, in a position to accept or refuse a flag in this type of of situation.
But I think also some of these flags that they're kind of moving towards, some of the insurers are not licensed to do those flags. So they might say, right, I'm going to switch my flag to whatever, I'm not going to name any, and then they can't find insurance because the insurer's not licensed.
Bank perspective as well. I mean, if you do some licensing, I mean, if you want to do financing, if you want to do leasing, I mean, a company is going, as a bank, is going to tell you, well, you need to register your yacht with XZY flag. And that's what's going to impact the industry. I mean,
so do you, let's say in 10 years' time, we might see a lot more EU flags on yachts, you expect?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm really sure. I mean, I'm only going to quote one flag, which is Malta. Malta has had an increase of flagging over the past 3 years. Why? Because the UK, because of Brexit, because the UK was no longer part of the EU, and you had, because there's a lot of social law consequences, etc., the only available and, you know, nice flag was Malta. So for sure.
But, you know, to go back to what you said earlier, and the geographical positioning of some boats owned by Russian is switching. And we see, of course, a lot going to the UAE,
yeah, of course,
Turkey, and we also see and know for a fact that many of these owners are now reflagging. And some flags are still welcoming them, and white flags. So there are still opportunities out there. For how long, I do not know. But, you know, they are preventing the fact of being deflagged by looking after new opportunities with different flags. And this is possibly a switch which you may see. I don't know if it will last when the conflict is over, but you will definitely see an increase of Russian-owned boats going into alternative flags, which are still white flags. So that's definitely a move which is happening as we speak.
Yeah, but I think to reply to you, I think that, to be honest, I mean, to give an example, I think you would have less issue today to register a Russian-owned. Russia is a crisis, so Russia shouldn't be, you know, what's going to lead the industry in the next 10 years, but it's just going to set some of the issues. So we know which are the issues, how they're going to be addressed. In 10 years' time, you would have a similar crisis. I'm pretty sure that it would be much easier to register a yacht with, say, I don't know, Italy, France, than with, for the simple reason that you don't have the same strengths at the international level. Nobody's going to go after, you know, the hot big countries and say, oh, you register that yacht. But you can go and you have that pressure over small, tiny islands and say, well, you simply do not have the right to do so. So this is a point. So
the UAE flag is becoming popular.
Yeah, the UAE flag is becoming popular. The neighboring big one, Saudi, is working on, I mean, well, we know.
And do you think it's that the UAE and maybe the Indian Ocean will be of increasing popularity, or is it just a temporary situation?
Well, I mean, we're not fortune tellers nor have a crystal balls, but I think one's bitten, one's shy. And I believe after what some of the owners are going through, even the ones who are not sanctioned today, but very, very worried of being sanctioned, you see that move definitely happening today towards different waters, i.e. UAE, potentially Turkey, and I believe this will be for a while. Now, there's so much you can do in the UAE waters, so it might become boring at the end, but I believe for the time being, you will see that move happening. Now, how long it will last, hopefully not too long.
Maybe we can open, we get some questions from the floor.
There's one thing also, sorry, before we, and I guess you can confirm. I mean, we've been, there's a lot of questions on who owns what and who is behind that boat or who charters what. But we've been, especially in Monaco, the last few years, following a very strong and required regulations which are put in place by SIGFA. And I think today, whilst of course all of us have more administrative work than we ever had before, I don't think the fact that we have the war happening in Russia is adding a lot more work in terms of checking the UBOs and the background and et cetera, et cetera. So whilst We used to do it on the sales front. It's becoming a little more cumbersome also on the charter front, because not only people are now asking who is chartering, but also who is owning the boat. And that's becoming the challenge today, I think we're all facing. But this is part of our job, and I think, as you rightly outlined, this is a bad for a good going forward. I think the fact that we are doing our due diligence and know who is doing what with whom, it's a pretty good thing for the industry going forward.
Any questions from the audience?
Ladies first.
Thank you, everyone. The EU has made it clear it has plans to end the historical dependency on Russian energy. Can you hear me okay? Okay. The European Union has made it clear to end its historical dependency on Russian energy and fuel prices. In your opinion, to what extent will you advise the AFIR's price increase to impact the yachting industry and customer preferences about the fuel increases?
Well, the increase of fuel is going like a roller coaster. I don't think it has yet impacted the way people handle and manage their yachts. As I said earlier, the charter market is exploding to what we see, and clearly the fuel plays a big role and impact in the way you charter a yacht. People may stay longer in the port, not to spend too much on fuel. We haven't seen that yet. When it comes to ownership, remember, many of the yachts today are being utilized 3 months per year at the most, or 4 months per year, with some exceptions. The crisis being in the winter time, I don't think it has yet have had a tremendous impact on the usage of your boat. But clearly, if the prices are going up the roof, people will be certainly more careful. But I don't think it's yet a deterrent to the yachting industry.
Thank you. A legal question. On the sanctions, although there are strong property rights, do you think, for example, the Italian anti-mafia and anti-drug cartel laws will be used to accelerate the process of seizing the Russian yachts? And will auction be used as a method of selling it? And is the yachting industry equipped to deal with auction as a method of sale? 3 questions in one.
Well, we're not yet at that's a very different, that's a very interesting one, but we're not in a situation, in fact, where the Russian listed person are criminals. That's some things that people need to bear in mind. We're just talking about a public policy measure which were taken, so we're not talking about mafiosi. And that's a whole issue, about arresting and doing things. So to be honest with you, I have no reply at this stage, because that's not, in fact, for the yachting industry. That's more for the judges to address, because I expect that at some point we're discussing that just before the meeting. One issue which is going to rise is that of the maintenance of those yachts. Because from the moment that you have no insurance, that you have no bank accounts, how do you do to pay for all the wages, all the expenses of the yacht? Then comes, who's going to pay for that? The owner cannot pay for that. So that's going to be for the state, for the countries, which is sooner or later this is going to come. And then the issue is going to be, if we spend that much money in yachts, we need to make that money. So how do? We need to arrest the yachts and we need to sell them. But then you're going to be in my opinion, a lot of litigation in that respect. Because again, we're not talking about people who are legally regarded as criminal, civilly liable or something. It's just a general public policy measure. So I don't think the question is whether or not the yachting industry is equipped. I'm wondering if the judges are going to be equipped, or equipped they are to the action, but are going to follow the rule rezoning. So if we take that path, if the authorities take that path, I expect a lot of litigation.
Yeah, I think at the stage of when the yachts is at that stage, it's probably going to be uninsured for a while as well, because they would have probably pulled cover before that. So with the maintenance issues and everything, then it's, what state is the yacht going to be in by then?
I think it's probably a question for Marijn. I know that he didn't want to ask to questions to be asked, but don't you feel that media are overreacting?
I mean, I think, global media, they sell entertainment and they want people to read their articles, and I mean, I think, it's the politicians, it's everybody, and, I think it's quite down a bit. I think a month ago, my phone was ringing a lot if I wanted to be in TV shows, on radios and things like that, because yachts were, it was selling very well to their audiences. And I mean, the general media will jump on anything where it has a big impact. And, big boats are very nice to look at, and it's very easy to use them. So, I mean, is the general media overreacting? I like to see them a bit less, but I mean, it's out of our control. And I think it's, something, you see it already a bit less, in a few weeks ago, when the start of this, they were all chasing, finding yachts, where are they going, where are they? But it's becoming a bit less interesting for them, I guess, because it probably sells less good with their audience.
I think one thing, though, if I may add to this, is I remember when I started on that side of yachting 6 years ago. In general, yachting had this light of billionaires and champagne and, to some extent, girls and stars and you name it. And I think when COVID started and the way we all marketed yachting and spoke about yachting, and people also who didn't know so much about yachting got to understand more about yachting and liked yachting, and this is probably why we see that influx into yachting today. And unfortunately, that crisis, I mean, obviously at our level, it's nothing to compare to what the crisis brings to people. But it clearly shed a negative light on our industry. And I think that's something we need to be aware of, because we are talking 9% of the market. But what you see making the headlines are what, 6, 7, 8 Russian-owned boats? Because they are the biggest, or some of the biggest. And it shed that light on our industry, which I don't think needed it. So I think we all are going to go back again and make us shine again when this conflict is over.
If I may ask Mr. Solo, I think would be the best person to reply to this question. Before everything started with the seizing of the boats and the freezing and etc., some crew left because they were working on Russian-owned boats. What do you see in the future when hopefully everything will be very soon? Everybody hopes it will be resolved, and then the Russian boats will come back, the Russian owners will come back. Obviously the numbers will change there, but in terms of crew, how do you see this evolve? Will crew go back to Russian-owned boats, or will they in general refuse and say, not anymore?
That's a good question. We have had some challenges with boats owned by Russian, not sanctioned, not being criminals, but having been inspected by the customs or whatever authorities, and the crew got scared, so they left the boat. And that is a fact today. However, I think when the crisis is over, you will still see some crew members who are willing to work for Russian owners. I mean, not all Russians are bad people. They are very great owners, and they take care of their crew. And crew members know this. I mean, the ones who left the boat they were working for, they left because they were scared of not being paid or being stranded on the boat. But when things resume to normality, if it may, I think crew members will go back and work for Russian boats. I'm pretty positive about this.
Thank you so much. I think we will finish this roundtable with another question. The last one, maybe.
This is a question to Marijn and Edouard regarding what happened last week in court between Hazen Shipyard and the notary. Do you have any comments? Are you aware of the situation, I guess?
I mean, I think it's, I'm legally, I'm not a lawyer, so, but I mean, I think I read comments in the Dutch press, and I mean, obviously I asked Hazen for a comment, but I think I think it's too early to say something about it. I'm not sure if Edouard has, if you read
Same
it.
thing. I mean, I don't have the info. It's just press report. And talking about, media representation, I mean, overreaction. I think that the issues that we face over the past 2 months was not overreaction that much, was simply misrepresentation of situation. So I would be extremely careful. Now, position is that I'm extremely careful with what I read in the press, because I know for a fact that there was a lot of situations which were described in a certain way by the press, which simply did not correspond to the truth and the reality of facts, the legal reality. So I know I know what's going on in the Netherlands. I don't know what is true, what is the process, if this is grounded or not grounded, if the Russian interests that we're talking about are true or not true. And I don't know what are the real legal measures which have been taken. But I think that, to reply, I think that it's not that much about the media. I think politicians have been playing, this is my personal feelings that I don't ask anybody to share. I've been playing a dirty game for the past 2 months in that respect, trying to emphasize the gap between what was going on in Ukraine with the deaths, Mariupol, etc., and on the other side, and this is the issue that we have, the yachts, and trying, to create that type of gap. That's a dirty and that's a dangerous game that you're playing, because, again, not all Russians, unfortunately, are Putin. Most of them are pretty nice. I mean, the people who came here in Monaco came here for a reason. And things that will have to work, the industry and the authorities will have to work a lot to come back to the initial position. So,
I think in this case it was nothing politically involved, it's purely legal. It basically shows that it is very difficult to de-Russify an asset. So even if parties involved would like to neutralize the assets so that construction of yachts and so can go on, it is legally not possible.
I didn't hear what you said, sorry. I didn't hear what you said.
Is it not working? Sorry. No, I think in this case it was not a political question at all. It was purely legal. It shows that a de-Russifying an asset, even if the parties involved are more in agreement, it's just not legally possible.
That's a matter of domestic law. So I cannot tell you the reply under Dutch law. I would tell you here, but we don't have any precedents for the time being. Yes, it should be, because from a regulation perspective, there's a whole process to be followed. I'm not going to go into technicalities, but what you always need to bear in mind is that in all that regulation, it's always possible to apply for some exemption with the concerned authority. So the process, that would be the case here. I tell you, the process would be to have an authorization to transfer the share, so to de-Russify, to do so, and then you can proceed.
Okay. Thank you so much. A last question, because we are already quite late. It's my fault.
Company Co-France and Nice, I believe that even if you want to close down this discussion, I think you're probably too optimistic. As an aircraft owner, I should say that for the moment, yachting is really in very attractive position, because, for example, for private jets, none of the Russians are allowed to enter private jets, and we have a lot of situation in Monaco where clients having 2, 3, 4 passports, European passports, like Maltese, Cyprus, and Bulgarian, Lithuanian, whatever. And definitely, from the legal point of view, it's a discrimination, but still, all the authorities in Europe are not allowing to enter the aircraft. And the same situation, I assume, would be it's a question of time, let's say in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks with the yachting, because it's the politic of the European Union and European Commission that they would not cancel this. And what is also important, that it's not a conflict, it's a serious war is going on, which would not finish like by the start of the season. It would be at least for several years now. and we have to be prepared. And my understanding, what you are saying about the sanctions, it's what people want to hear, but not what in the reality would be there. So let's try to be more realistic and try to prepare the community for the further sanctions. And in fact, I think new sanctions would be announced today or tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I think in terms of insurance perspective, I think possibly, things are going to get worse in terms of finding insurance for Russian-owned yachts. If they do renew it, then possibly, we were seeing mid-term cancellations, but at the moment it's fairly stable, but it could change, and going forward, it could be really impossible to find insurance. I don't know.
Well, I think just to address your point about, the distinction, which is the aircraft and ships. In fact, the toughest sanctions are the ones which have been enacted about aircraft. But that was 2-3 months. But there's a reasoning for that. It's because an aircraft is used generally as a weapon. So that's the reason why the aircraft from the very start had the toughest regulation, which was prohibiting simply, Russians are simply forbidden to charter, own, operate a yacht within the EU space. Doing that for yacht, I'm not saying that they might not do so, but turning to a point where this could happen in 1 or 2 weeks. I'm not so sure that this is going to be that easy for yacht. To prevent a Russian owner to be on a yacht within the Med, which is pretty much your point, is going to be something extremely, extremely complicated. Because we're not talking about the same risk. We're not talking about the same issues at all. So they've been already very, very far in terms of sanctions. Forbidding anybody to sell luxury assets to Russia. Increasing the regulation about double technology is already something extremely, extremely strong. So I'm not an optimistic person, to be honest with you, but to reply to your point, I think that we were more talking about the global industries and the specific case of the Russian. I get the message that the global industry was doing good, and that the Russian, but nobody is saying that the situation in Russia is going to get better in the next few months or few years. But I don't know if that's going to be increased so much. I think that now we're really going to see the time where all those positions where the press is going to speak to the opinion about the consequences of that. Don't forget that when all those sanctions took place, you had the election in France, you had the election in the UK, you had the wool problem. So there were some reasons also to take that position. I don't know if people I speak about the area, when you're going to talk about the French over there, that they're going to have to pay for the maintenance of the yacht. I don't know if they're going to be so happy about that.
And furthermore, I think the difference with jet and multinationalities, today the European law is very clear. If you are holding EU residency, of course, if you're not sanctioned, you can use and charter a yacht as much as you want. There's not such restriction of not flying. So we don't see that yet. It may change, as you rightly said, but we don't see this yet. And I don't think that will change.
No, Edward, just one comment, because I believe I'm a pessimistic too. Just to look in the shipping. Look at the shipping, what's going on. You have a much more, whatever is happening in shipping is going to happen on the yachting. It's a question of time. And today, especially with the underwriters, P&I Club, the banking, and the ports. The ports now, Italian ports, they don't accept Russian flag vessel. And there will be also Russian-owned vessel. Sovcomflot has 165 vessels. They will have no insurance in a question of time. So be careful. It's going ahead, this war is going ahead, and there's going to be bad effect, definitely on the economy and in transportation, in the trade. Yachting will be also, it's a question of time, having the same consequence.
I agree with you, Roberto, but it's just I don't think that they need to increase the sanction. The sanctions are already there. I don't think that new sanctions, I don't know, again, I'm not a fortune teller, they don't need, the real sanctions about the insurance banking sector, I mean, they don't need to increase anything. Today, it's not, you don't need to make a prohibition for Russian owners to come in the matter. From the moment, I'm talking about the listing one, from the moment that they're unable about the listing to operate a yacht.
Also for the new building. I'm talking about new building.
Yeah.
When we are going to deliver the vessel, until it's in the yard, it's fine. When it has to be delivered and is Russian owned, doesn't matter, in any European country, will be a problem.
In any case, they're not supposed presently, they simply cannot deliver. So it's just impossible. So I don't, but again, I think that we've reached a kind of a top line in terms of regulation, so there's no need to increase that. I mean, the effect is done. So now let's see. It's not a matter of being optimistic, it's just let's see how all that regulation is going to be implemented in real life. Because the point that was, I mean, this is one thing to say, you have no right to do this, I'm going to freeze your assets. But now to address all the consequences of that is another story. Again, my question is, who's going to pay for those yachts which are here in Europe? Who's going to pay? I mean, there's some obligation. I mean, I speak for what I think, but all regulation, you have an obligation to insure your yachts, you have an obligation to pay the wages of your crew, you have the obligation to ensure there's MARPOL, all of that. If the owner cannot pay for that, if the insurers cannot pay for that, who's going to pay for that? So that's a topic. I mean, this is going to come.